The power of kindness can lead us to true love. Let me start by saying something most people hate to hear. The majority of folks will never experience true love, not because they don't deserve it, but because they've been trained to look for love in all the wrong places. They've been told that love comes when you get rich, when you improve your appearance, when you achieve status or become somebody in life. But here's the uncomfortable and liberating truth. The deepest love almost always grows far from the spotlight, far from the hustle, and far from the ego. It's born from kindness practiced when nobody's watching. Few people believe this, but the truth cuts deep while setting you free. True love rarely springs from the search for love itself. It emerges from kindness, from silent faith, from hope practiced on ordinary days. We live in a world that glorifies the wealthy, the billionaire, status and speed, but ignores the transformative power of a simple gesture made by someone who might be poor in possessions yet rich in feelings. And that's exactly where most people lose their way. Maybe you've done everything right and life still knocked you down. Maybe you're a woman who's been fighting tooth and nail, or someone who's always chosen to act with gratitude even when you got nothing in return. And deep down, there's that nagging question. Is it worth continuing to be good in a world that doesn't seem to reward it? The answer isn't obvious, and that's precisely why it changes everything. If you believe love stems from self-interest, this story's going to make you uncomfortable. If you think being good is naivete, it'll challenge you. And if somewhere deep inside you still hold hope that true love exists, not the movie kind, but the type that builds, sustains, and transforms, then maybe you're about to grasp something you can't learn from shallow content. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't loving someone. It's continuing to be good in a world that pushes you to harden your heart. This story begins with a fall, both literal and symbolic. A fall that exposes something few admit. Life doesn't knock down the weak, it tests the good. And when someone falls, what defines destiny isn't who passes by, but who stops. A small gesture, a simple act of care, a choice made out of kindness, can completely alter the course of two lives. What almost nobody realizes is that these silent decisions create encounters that seem like coincidence, but aren't. Picture this, rain-soaked streets reflecting city lights, the kind of day when everything feels heavier, the air smells of wet asphalt and possibility. This isn't just about a woman on a bicycle or a man in a car, it's about the invisible threads that connect souls when they're ready to see each other. It's about recognizing that inspiration doesn't come from grand gestures, but from the quiet moments when someone chooses compassion over convenience. And it's about understanding that whether you're a CEO in a penthouse or someone counting coins for bus fare, the capacity for love and kindness remains the ultimate currency. She pedaled like someone fulfilling a silent ritual every single day. That bicycle was her partner in autonomy, daily effort, and dignity. It wasn't luxury, wasn't status. It was survival mixed with faith and hope in her sweat. Each turn of the pedals carried the motivation of someone who knew that even though she was poor in the world's eyes, she could be rich in wisdom. And there she was, a fighter of a woman, pushing forward even when nobody applauded. The bicycle, at this point, wasn't just transportation. It was living proof that kindness begins when you don't give up on yourself. She had this way about her, the kind of quiet strength that doesn't announce itself. Her name was Sophia, though she'd tell you names don't matter much when you're just trying to get by. At 32, she'd already lived several lifetimes. Her hands showed the evidence. Slight calluses from gripping handlebars through countless commutes, a small scar on her left thumb from a kitchen accident at the restaurant where she'd worked for 7 years. But it was her eyes that told the real story. Deep brown and observant, they held both wariness and wonder, the kind you only develop when life's taught you to expect disappointments, but you've stubbornly refused to stop believing in small miracles. The neighborhood she pedaled through was one of those in-between places, not quite prosperous, not entirely forgotten. Buildings wore their age like weathered skin, with air conditioning units jutting out like mechanical barnacles. Small family-owned shops lined the streets, a corner store with handwritten signs advertising daily specials, a repair shop where an old man could fix anything from watches to washing machines, a bakery that filled the morning air with the scent of fresh bread. This was the kind of community where everyone knew your business but also had your back, where success meant paying your bills on time and kindness was the social glue holding everything together. Then came the rain, the kind that doesn't ask permission and changes everything in seconds. The wet street became the perfect metaphor for life's difficult phases, those moments when feelings slip and the ground disappears beneath you. How many times are good people, full of love and gratitude, knocked down precisely when they're doing everything right? The fall doesn't choose whether you're rich, a billionaire, or anonymous. It just happens. And it hurts more when nobody's watching, when there's no recognition, just the silence of rain hammering the asphalt. The moment it happened felt like slow motion and lightning fast all at once. Her front tire caught a slick patch near a storm drain, the kind of hazard you'd normally navigate without thinking. But today, distracted by worries about her younger brother's college tuition and her mother's medical bills, her reflexes lagged by just a split second. The bike slid sideways, and she hit the pavement hard. Right knee, left palm, pride scattered across the wet concrete like her scattered thoughts. In that moment, life seemed cruel, almost ironic, as if saying, "Let's see what you do now." Working hard, falling, getting up and continuing without any medal is the invisible training of the strong. A wise mentor would say the fall isn't punishment, it's a mirror. It shows who you are when everything fails. And it's precisely there that something begins to align, even though nobody notices yet, because certain stories only move forward after the tumble. Lying there on that rain-slicked street, with dirty water seeping through her clothes and the metallic taste of embarrassment in her mouth, Sophia felt something crack inside, not physically, but spiritually. It was the kind of moment that forces you to confront the question, why do I keep trying? She'd been kind to people who'd taken advantage. She'd worked double shifts to cover for colleagues who never returned the favor. She'd given her last $20 to a homeless veteran while wondering how she'd eat until payday. And here she was, sprawled on the ground like the universe's punchline. But here's what most people miss about falls. They're not endpoints, they're inflection points. They're the universe's brutal way of asking, do you really believe in the person you're trying to be, or are you just going through the motions? Sophia didn't know it yet, but her answer to that unspoken question was about to arrive in the form of a silver sedan slowing to a stop beside her. Still sitting on the wet ground, trying to catch her breath and her dignity after the fall, she noticed a car pulling up slowly beside her. It wasn't a honk or hurry, it was care. The door opened, and as she looked up, time seemed to glitch for a second. There he was, the platonic love from adolescence, the one she'd admired from afar in school hallways, now grown, real, too close to ignore. Her heart raced, not from the knee pain, but from the shock of seeing the past take form in the pouring rain. His name was Daniel, though back in high school everyone called him Danny. He'd been the quiet type, the guy who'd sit in the back of class, not because he was trouble, but because he genuinely preferred observing to performing. While other boys flexed their limited masculinity through sports or attitude, Daniel had this gentleness about him, the kind that made insecure teenagers call him soft, but made perceptive people recognize him as solid. He was the kind built more through effort than privilege. He'd constructed his trajectory through constant work, learning early that respect matters more than status. He wasn't rich or a billionaire, but he carried a rare wealth, genuine attention. As he helped her up, his gestures were careful, almost shy. When he recognized who she was, he looked away for an instant, smiling awkwardly, like someone who never thought himself worthy of the admiration he'd received years ago. His embarrassment didn't come from insecurity, but from humility. "Sophia!" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the cool composure he'd tried to project. "Oh my God, are you okay? That looked really bad." She found herself laughing despite the pain, despite the absurdity of the moment. Daniel Martinez, seriously, of all the people. She shook her head, rainwater flinging from her hair. "I swear, the universe has the weirdest sense of timing." "Tell me about it," he said, still holding her elbow to steady her. "I was literally just thinking about—" "Never mind. Can you stand? Should I call an ambulance?" "No, no ambulance." "Can't afford the ride," she said automatically, then immediately regretted it. Why'd she always lead with her poverty? But Daniel didn't flinch, didn't show that particular kind of pity that makes you feel smaller. Inside the car, the conversation began slowly, like stepping on sacred ground. They talked about simple things while old feelings tried to settle between awkward silences and nervous laughter. How many stories remain unfinished out of fear of seeming vulnerable? A wise mentor would say life loves these improbable encounters because they reveal how much we've grown, or haven't. And while they talked, someone in the back seat watched in silence, with a gaze too attentive to be mere coincidence. The car smelled like leather and subtle cologne, a scent that spoke of quiet success rather than ostentatious wealth. Rain drummed on the roof, creating a cocoon of sound that made their conversation feel both intimate and surreal. Daniel kept sneaking glances at her, and she caught herself doing the same, mapping the changes time had carved into his face. He'd grown into himself, she thought. The awkward angles of adolescence had settled into something more defined, more certain. "So what have you been up to?" he asked, immediately cringing at the generic question. "I mean, besides, biking in hurricanes." "It wasn't a hurricane when I left," she shot back, and they both laughed. I work at Lombardi's, that Italian place on 5th. Been there about 7 years now. It's steady work, good people. Not glamorous, but—" She shrugged. "What about you? Last I heard through the grapevine, you'd gone into business or something." "Something like that," Daniel said, and there was a weight to those words that made her curious. "I work in real estate development. Started from the ground up, literally. Spent 3 years on construction sites learning how buildings actually get made before I ever touched a contract. Figured if I was going to develop properties, I should understand them from the foundation up." There was that humility again, that refusal to oversell himself. Sophia remembered why she'd been drawn to him back then. While other guys had been all swagger and performance, Daniel had this quiet authenticity that made you want to know more. "That's really cool," she said genuinely. "Not many people take that route. Most just, jump straight to the money part." "Yeah, well..." He glanced in the rearview mirror, and Sophia suddenly remembered they weren't alone. "Money's not everything," Someone important taught me that. It was only after a few minutes of conversation that she noticed his presence in the back seat. An elegant gentleman, serene posture, gaze too attentive to be casual. It wasn't ostentation, it was sobriety, the kind of man who doesn't need to prove anything. When their eyes met, she felt a strange discomfort, as if being observed beyond the surface. There was no judgment there, just curiosity and a silent wisdom that comes from someone who's seen plenty of life. The man was probably in his mid-70s, but he wore his age like a well-tailored suit. It fit him perfectly without defining him. His hair was silver and impeccably styled, not in that desperate way some older men try to cling to youth, but with the confidence of someone who'd made peace with every decade. His eyes were striking, pale blue, almost translucent, and they seemed to see through pretense the way X-rays see through flesh. He wore simple clothes, a charcoal sweater over a crisp white shirt, dark slacks, but Sophia could tell, even through her limited fashion knowledge, that these were expensive. Not the kind of expensive that screams for attention, but the quiet expense that whispers quality to those who know how to listen. The revelation came naturally, almost without initial impact. In the middle of conversation, Daniel mentioned his grandfather casually, and only then did she understand. This man was a CEO billionaire. One of those rare cases where wealth doesn't shout but whispers. Still, what caught her attention most wasn't the money but his emotional tranquility. He spoke little, but when he did, there was purpose. He was living proof that someone can be rich in assets while being deep in gratitude, faith, and humanity. "Alessandro Moretti," the old man said suddenly, extending his hand toward the front seat. His voice had the texture of aged whiskey, smooth but with a burn that let you know it was real. "But please, call me Sandro." "Only my lawyers call me Alessandro, usually when I'm about to sign something expensive." Sophia laughed despite herself. "Sophia Reyes, nice to meet you, Sandro. The pleasure is mine, young lady, though I have to say, Daniel here is terrible at introductions. He's had me sitting back here like some kind of secret package." His eyes twinkled with amusement, but there was something else there too. Assessment, calculation, the kind of scrutiny that comes from decades of reading people. Daniel groaned. No, I was getting to it." "Sure you were," Sandro said dryly. "Just like you were getting to asking her out back in high school, right?" The car filled with an electric silence. Sophia's mouth dropped open slightly, and Daniel's face went 3 shades redder than she'd thought possible. "Grandfather," Daniel said through gritted teeth, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, but Sandro just chuckled, completely unbothered by his grandson's mortification. "What? I'm old. I get to say what everyone else is thinking. It's one of the few perks of surviving this long." Sophia found herself warming to the old man immediately. There was something refreshing about his directness, the way he seemed to operate on a plane beyond social niceties without being rude. This wasn't the kind of billionaire she'd imagined from movies. No cold calculation, no detached superiority. Instead, there was a sparkle of mischief, a suggestion that despite his wealth and success, he hadn't forgotten how to be human. The grandfather's gaze rested on her, as if he already knew her, as if confirming something only he knew. Sometimes he'd smile from the corner of his mouth, other times he'd remain in absolute silence. Coincidence starts to feel like destiny when small details align effortlessly. A wise mentor would say certain connections cross time and return when we're ready to see them, And in that instant, something invisible was beginning to close, or perhaps preparing to be revealed in the most unlikely place possible. "You know," Sandro said thoughtfully, watching the rain streak across the window, "I spent 40 years building companies, making deals, accumulating what people call success. Built 3 hospitals, 2 universities, more office buildings than I can count. But you want to know what I remember most clearly from all those years?" Sophia twisted in her seat to look at him properly. "What?" "The day someone stopped to help me when my car broke down in 1973. I was nobody then, just a kid with big dreams and empty pockets, standing on a highway shoulder in the rain, much like today. A woman pulled over, gave me a ride to town, wouldn't accept a cent. I asked her why, and she said, 'Because kindness is the only investment that always pays dividends.'" He paused, his pale eyes distant with memory. "Took me 30 more years to understand what she meant. By then, I was already a CEO, already chasing the next $1 billion, thinking money was the scoreboard. Turns out I'd had the answer all along, I just wasn't ready to hear it." The car went quiet, except for the rain and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. Sophia felt goosebumps rise on her arms, though whether from the story or the way Sandro was looking at her, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for decades, she couldn't quite tell. Daniel cleared his throat. "Nonno tells that story to everyone he meets, because everyone needs to hear it," Sandro countered, "especially in a world that's forgotten the currency of compassion, especially young people who still have time to build their lives on the right foundation." His eyes hadn't left Sophia. "You chose to stop falling, young lady. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "I didn't really choose," Sophia said honestly. "I just landed." "Exactly," Sandro said with satisfaction. "You landed. You didn't quit. There's a difference." He knelt carefully, touching her ankle lightly, like someone who knows there are pains that go beyond the body. She said it hurt, maybe more from embarrassment than from the fall itself. While he examined with attention, he asked calmly if she was feeling better, if she could stand. That simple gesture carried something rare, true presence. She observed him without quite understanding what she felt, only knowing it was good, comfortable, almost safe. Feelings that can't be explained, only perceived. Daniel's hands were warm despite the rain, and Sophia noticed details she'd never been close enough to see in high school. A small scar on his right index finger, the way he bit his lower lip slightly when concentrating, how his touch managed to be both gentle and certain. He wasn't treating her like she was fragile, he was treating her like she mattered. "Okay, I'm not a doctor," he said, "but I don't think anything's broken. Probably gonna have a hell of a bruise, though. Can you flex your foot?" She did, wincing. "Yeah, it's okay. Really. I've had worse. Last year I slipped on ice and—" "Sophia," he interrupted gently, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stopped her mid-sentence. "You don't have to minimize it. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to need help." Something in his words cracked open a door she'd kept locked for years. When had she started doing that, downplaying every injury, every struggle, every moment of weakness, because she'd learned that needing help made people see you as a burden? When she managed to put her foot on the ground, he smiled and gave a discreet compliment, the kind that doesn't invade but stays. He said she was strong, that he could tell by the way she tried to get up even while hurt. He didn't talk about appearance, he talked about essence. That disarmed her. Gratitude arose naturally, mixed with a timid hope. It was then he suggested, almost without ceremony, that she get in the car. They'd take her to the restaurant where she worked. It wasn't a grandiose favor, but it was kindness in motion. "I really don't want to impose," she started, but Sandro's voice cut through from the back seat. "Young lady, if you say, 'I don't want to impose,' one more time, I'm going to think my grandson raised you instead of the other way around. He gets that from his mother, all that unnecessary self-effacement. Get in the car. Your bicycle will fit in the trunk. Daniel, stop standing there like a statue and help her." There was no arguing with that tone. It was the voice of someone who'd spent decades making executive decisions and expected them to be followed. But it wasn't mean. It was almost paternal in its insistence. Inside the car, with her bicycle somehow crammed into the trunk, Daniel had a surprising knack for spatial reasoning. The conversation flowed easily, surprisingly light. They laughed about small things, talked about routine, the insistent rain, life that doesn't warn you when it's about to change direction. He listened more than he spoke, and that made her feel seen. A wise mentor knows true connections are born like this, without effort, without hidden intention. And as the car moved forward, something was quietly consolidating, preparing ground for an encounter that would go far beyond that unpretentious ride. "So what's your story, Sophia?" Daniel asked, navigating through traffic with practiced ease. And I mean the real story, not the resume version." She hesitated, unused to being asked to tell the truth instead of the palatable version. "That's a pretty heavy question for a car ride." "We've got time," he said simply. "And honestly, I've spent the last 10 years in meetings where everyone lies very professionally. It'd be nice to hear something real." From the back seat, Sandro made a sound that might have been approval or might have been laughter. "Okay," Sophia said, surprising herself. "Real version. I'm tired, like bone-deep exhausted. I work 50-hour weeks at a job I'm good at, but that'll never be more than it is. I send money home to help my mom with medical bills and my brother with school. I ride a bicycle because I sold my car 3 years ago when my dad got sick. I'm 32, and I have $300 in savings. And some days, most days, I wonder if I'm doing any of this right, or if I'm just, I don't know, existing without actually living." The words hung in the air like smoke, visible and impossible to take back. She waited for the inevitable awkwardness, the platitudes, the quick subject change. Instead, Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me with that. Most people would tell you it gets better," Sandro said from the back. "I'm not most people. Some seasons are just hard, but here's what I know. The people who make it through the hard seasons with their kindness intact, they're the ones who change the world, not because they become successful, though many do, but because they prove it's possible to be ground down and not become ground. You follow?" Sophia found herself nodding, tears prickling unexpectedly at her eyes. When was the last time someone had acknowledged her struggle without trying to fix it or diminish it? "The restaurant's just up ahead," she said, her voice slightly thick, "the one with the green awning." But neither Daniel nor Sandro seemed in any hurry to end the conversation. Upon arriving at the restaurant, she got out of the car with a sincere smile, thanking them more than once, like someone who recognizes rare care. In a few seconds, she crossed through the door and put on the waitress role again, returning to routine with naturalness. The man and his billionaire grandfather entered soon after, choosing a simple table. While she served them with attention and kindness, he watched her silently, admiring that mixture of strength and delicacy. Without realizing it, A deep connection was beginning to form, made of respect and contained feelings. Lombardi's wasn't fancy by any stretch. It was the kind of Italian-American place that had been serving the same neighborhood for 35 years. Red checkered tablecloths, Chianti bottles converted to candle holders, a faded mural of the Italian countryside covering one wall. The air smelled perpetually of garlic and basil and the kind of tomato sauce that takes all day to make right. Most of the staff had worked there for years, and most of the customers were regulars who came in weekly, ordered the same dishes, sat at the same tables. Sophia moved through this familiar landscape with practiced grace, even with her knee throbbing. She greeted other customers by name, remembered that Mrs. Chen always wanted extra cheese, that the Lopez family needed crayons for their kids before the menus even arrived. Daniel watched, fascinated by the way she seemed to hold the entire room's ecosystem in her head. She took notes on orders, explained the menu, and moved with lightness between tables, even after the fall. For him, this said more than any conversation. He thought to himself how someone can be poor in goods but rich in gratitude, wisdom, and presence. A wise mentor knows it's in this type of everyday detail that love begins to be born, far from promises and interests. The grandfather, attentive, seemed to understand everything without anyone needing to say a word. When she came to their table, Sophia had transformed slightly, not fake, but professional. This was her domain, her stage, where poverty became invisible behind competence and warmth. "Welcome to Lombardi's," she said, the greeting automatic but genuine. "Can I start you gentlemen with something to drink?" Sandro smiled slowly, his pale eyes bright with something like delight. "What do you recommend, my dear?" "Honestly, the house red is actually good. Tony brings it in from his cousin's vineyard in California. It's not fancy, but it's real, you know. Or if you want something non-alcoholic, the homemade lemonade is legendary. Little bit of mint, little bit of secret ingredient that Maria will literally never tell anyone." "I'll have the lemonade," Sandro said immediately. "I appreciate a woman who keeps her secrets, shows character." Daniel ordered the same, still watching Sophia with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was it admiration, nostalgia, something else entirely? "And for food?" she asked, pen poised over her notepad. "What do you eat here?" Daniel asked suddenly. Like, when you're on break or after a shift, what do you order?" She blinked, thrown by the question. Usually I just grab whatever's about to be thrown out. Honestly, saves money and—" "Not what I asked," he interrupted gently. "What do you actually like? If money wasn't an issue, what would you order?" The question felt like a small revolution. "The pappardelle with wild mushroom ragu," she admitted. "It's stupidly expensive for what it is, but Marco, our chef, he makes it with porcini and truffle oil and this cream sauce that's basically illegal. It's so good." "2 of those," Daniel said immediately. "But it's—" "2," he repeated, holding her gaze. "Please." She wrote it down, something warm and confusing spreading through her chest. "Coming right up." As she walked away, Sandro leaned forward, his voice low. "You know what I like about her?" "What?" Daniel asked, still watching Sophia navigate the room. "She's not performing for us. Look, that smile she just gave that elderly couple. Same warmth she showed us. That laugh with the family in the corner. Completely genuine. She's not code-switching her kindness based on who might benefit her. That's rare. That's real. That's the kind of character you can build a life with." Daniel felt his heart rate pick up. "Nonno, I literally just gave her a ride. I think you're reading into... Oh, I'm reading perfectly well, Sandro interrupted. I'm old, not blind. You've been half in love with this girl since high school. I saw the photo in your yearbook that you thought I didn't notice. And here's life in its infinite wisdom, literally putting her in your path again. If you think that's coincidence, then I haven't taught you anything. She noted the orders, explained the menu, and moved with lightness between the tables, even after the fall. For him, this said more than any conversation. He thought to himself how someone can be poor in goods, but rich in gratitude, wisdom, and presence. The wise mentor knows it's in this type of everyday detail that love begins to be born, far from promises and interests. The grandfather, attentive, seemed to understand everything without anyone needing to say a word. When the meal ended, the unexpected gesture came. She paid the bill, not as an obligation but as genuine reciprocation. This touched the grandfather deeply, awakening old memories of a time when he too needed help. His eyes filled with emotion upon realizing that life was closing a circle with almost poetic precision. Goodness, when planted with faith, never disappears. It just waits for the right moment to bloom again. Sophia, what are you doing? Daniel asked as she approached with the paid check. Returning the favor, she said simply. You helped me when I was literally in the gutter. Least I can do is buy you lunch. But you don't. I know what I don't have, she said, and there was steel underneath the kindness. But I also know who I am. And I'm someone who pays her debts, so we're even now, okay? Sandro was very still, his eyes suspiciously bright. When Sophia looked at him, concerned she'd somehow offended him, he shook his head slowly. Do you know what you just did? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. I paid for lunch. No, he said. You gave an old man a gift more valuable than anything in his bank accounts. You reminded me why I started all this in the first place. You reminded me what inspiration actually looks like. He stood, somewhat stiffly, and took her hand in both of his. Thank you, young lady. That kindness, that refusal to be diminished by circumstance, that's the kind of wealth that actually matters. That's what builds legacies. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes for the second time that day. I don't want to owe anyone. Then you understand the most important thing, Sandro said. True independence isn't about not needing anyone. It's about maintaining your dignity in every exchange. Rich or poor, CEO or waitress. That's what separates the truly wealthy from the merely rich. It was only after all that he found the courage to say what had always been there, quiet, waiting for maturity. He looked at her now without the idealization of adolescence, but with real respect, the kind born when you admire someone's essence. He commented, with disarming sincerity, that he'd always found her special, even without ever approaching her. It wasn't a rehearsed declaration, it was raw truth. The wise mentor knows love doesn't begin with promises but with recognition. They stood outside Lombardi's, the rain having finally stopped, leaving the world washed and somehow new. The evening sun broke through the clouds, turning every wet surface into a mirror, and Sophia felt like she was standing in some kind of liminal space where the past and future were having a conversation. I need to tell you something, Daniel said, and she could hear his heart in his voice, and I'm probably gonna do it badly, but Nonno said, if I don't say it now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life, and he's usually right about these things. Sophia's breath caught. Okay, In high school, I was terrified of you, he began, and she laughed despite herself. Terrified? Of me? I was nobody. That's not true, he interrupted. You were kind to everyone. Like genuinely kind, not performative. You helped people without expecting anything back. I watched you give your lunch to that kid whose parents forgot to pack his 3 times in 1 week. I saw you stay after school to help Mrs. Rodriguez clean her classroom even though you had to work your shift at the grocery store. And I thought someone that good, that genuine, would never look twice at someone like me. Someone like you, Sophia repeated, confused. Daniel, you were invisible, he said. By choice. I made myself invisible because I was scared. Scared of being seen. Scared of failing. Scared of wanting something I didn't think I deserved. He took a breath. But I'm not scared anymore. Or maybe I am, but I'm doing it anyway. Because life just gave me this impossible gift. It literally put you in my path again. And if I walk away without telling you that you've been in my head for 15 years, then I'm still that scared kid, and I don't want to be him anymore. She listened in silence, feeling feelings organize themselves inside her. There was no rush, no exaggerated fantasy. There was security. They talked about the past without weight, about mistakes, choices, and the time that taught more than any book. He wasn't trying to impress, wasn't talking about achievements. He was talking about values. And this, curiously, creates a deeper connection than any grandiose gesture. Love, there, emerged as a natural consequence of mutual care. You know what I remember about you? Sophia asked softly. You were the only person in AP English who actually read the books. Like everyone else just used Spark Notes, but you'd come in with pages of notes ready to actually discuss the themes, and I remember thinking, that's someone who cares about getting it right, not just getting by. That's what I loved about you. Loved, Daniel echoed, hardly daring to breathe. Love, she corrected, and watched his face transform. The grandfather observed everything with a tranquil smile, one of those from someone who understands life. At a certain moment, he discreetly encouraged the reunion, not with romantic words, but with practical wisdom. When 2 people respect each other, the rest builds itself. True relationships begin like this, far from self-interest, close to truth. And while they talked, something new opened up, not as a promise of a happy ending, but as a conscious beginning of a shared journey. But you 2 young people think you're so complicated, Sandro said, stepping out of the restaurant where he'd been giving them privacy. But from where I'm standing, it's very simple. You both spent 15 years becoming people worthy of each other. That's not wasted time, that's preparation. Now the question is, what are you going to do with this second chance? Daniel looked at Sophia, then back at his grandfather. I want to do this right. No games, no pretending. I want to know you. Here's what most people miss about love stories. They're not really about love at all. They're about character. They're about who you choose to be when life knocks you down on a rain-soaked street, when nobody's watching, when being kind costs you something you can't afford to lose. This story isn't exceptional because Daniel stopped to help Sophia. Plenty of people might have done the same. It's exceptional because both of them, independently and over years of struggle, chose to remain soft in a world that rewards hardness. They chose gratitude over bitterness, generosity over self-protection, hope over cynicism. And that choice, that daily, unglamorous, utterly courageous choice, is what made them ready to recognize each other when fate offered its rare second chance. The truth is, we live in a society obsessed with shortcuts and life hacks, with becoming rich or successful or attractive enough that love will simply arrive as a reward for achievement. But real love, the kind that sustains you through illness and failure, the kind that grows deeper rather than dimmer with time, that kind of love is never a destination. It's a consequence. It's what happens when two people spend enough time becoming genuinely good humans that they're capable of recognizing and cherishing the same quality in another soul. Whether you're a CEO billionaire with unlimited resources or someone counting change for bus fare, the most valuable currency you'll ever possess is your capacity for kindness. That's what opens doors that money can't touch. That's what creates connections that status can't buy. That's what transforms a chance encounter in the rain into a love story worth telling. So the question isn't whether you'll find love. It's whether you'll become the kind of person capable of recognizing it when it finds you. And that transformation begins with a simple decision: to remain kind, to stay soft, to keep believing in goodness, even when the world gives you every reason not to. Because in the end, the greatest act of courage isn't falling in love. It's refusing to let a hard world harden your heart. That's the real story. That's the inspiration that changes everything.